going to begin in about 5 minutes, so we would like everybody to go out to the patio. We're going to have a presentation by the American Legion, and so we would like you to go out there and stand while they do their presentation, and then you can come back in, and we have a few speakers, and then we'll have lunch. So if you sort of could make your way out there, I'd appreciate it. Some of you are going with us on the boat out to scatter his ashes. We have room for 40 people, and I think some people in here maybe that didn't say they wanted to go, you can check with us. But we have a bus coming here to pick us up, take us down to the boat because of the parking situation on a weekend, and to bring us back here. The boat leaves at 3, and we should be back here by 5. And the validation should be good for the whole afternoon. That's what I've been told. Any other, Karen, would you hold up? We've done a little memorial pamphlet on Bob, and when we did this, we tried to highlight certain aspects of his life. And his biography is like 2 or 3 pages, so it was difficult. But anyway, this should give you a good picture of what this man gave to this life. So please take one. They're on the table over here. Okay, Bob had a very good friend by the name of Neela, and I don't think I can say your last name. Anyway, Bob had lunch with Neela many times, and they discussed a variety of topics. And so we have asked Neela to give a spiritual type presentation now, and then after he is finished, we'll have some other speakers. Then everybody will have a chance to give their stories about their association with Bob. But what we'll do is we'll have some speakers, and at noon they'll have the lunch available. You can get lunch, and then we'll pass the mic around, and you can tell us some funny stories about Bob, because I know some of his teammates here have some interesting things that you might like to hear. Okay, Neela?
Ladies and gentlemen, we're all gathered here today as family, friends, and colleagues of a great man who left our midst under sad and sudden circumstances. But our friend, Bob Sbordone, would have been the first to insist that we banish all sentiments of sorrow on this special day and instead celebrate his return home. And that's what this occasion is about. A celebration of an extraordinary man, a very special human being. My name is Neela Saga Devon. I know the last name is a mouthful that no one will remember. Bob was a close and dear friend. I deem it a singular honor to have been asked to say a few words today. However, I'm all too aware there are many among you who were closer to Bob than I was. To you, I say, thank you for allowing me the honor to make a few welcoming remarks. In particular, I would like to thank Barbara and Kristen and Karen for having asked me to do this and for granting me 15 minutes to do so. My personal spiritual beliefs, many of which, by the way, Bob happened to share, leave absolutely no doubt in my mind that he is here with us today. So, as I am speaking to you, I am speaking to Bob, who is also present. His signature chuckle and wide grin and sparkling eyes quite intact. Dissecting a life as rich and diverse and successful as Bob's is no easy task. I shall let others speak to his many exploits and achievements, and I will stay with aspects that I knew of Bob. The essence of my memory of Bob can be summarized in 5 words: humility, resolve, tenacity, compassion, and kindness. Unfortunately, time does not permit me to expound on each of these points in detail as they deserve. Instead, I shall attempt to paint his persona with a broad brush in the hope I may depict a few facets of the man that impressed me most. Bob would happily and with a great deal of pride point out to those who entered his personal orbit the roots of his humble, meager origins in Boston. Unlike far too many brilliant, successful individuals one meets along the way, Bob stood out as a refreshing exception. He not only wore his modest beginnings as a badge of honor, but used every sinew of mind and body to exploit conditions of adversity into an engine of self-transformation. Importantly, what I found particularly impressive about the arc of Bob's remarkable life was this: it was almost entirely self-impelled. It was a stellar trajectory of achievement that would eventually take him to the apogee of his profession as one of the world's preeminent neuropsychologists. One who not only practiced his profession with consummate skill and professionalism, but also authored 6 widely read textbooks and over 200 publications in peer-reviewed medical and scientific journals. He even had time for a work of science fiction, Client from the Future. Bob gave over 400 invited lectures at national and international conferences and symposia in Russia, Mexico, Canada, Great Britain, Romania, China, Spain, and across this country. Bob was nominated to receive the Outstanding Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Academy of Neuropsychology for his numerous professional achievements during the past 38 years. That's quite a resume. You see, Bob was born to Italian immigrant parents whom he would describe as having been poor. He took enormous pride in telling me that his father was a vegetable vendor. Ladies and gentlemen, in my personal memory, I can think of no greater shining exemplar of the great American success story than Dr. Bob Sbordone. Bob was a frequent guest at our home. He was a mentor to my son during his teenage years and was key to the lad's decision to enroll at USC, from where he recently graduated, much to Bob's delight, as an electrical engineer. Bob would joke that his visits were hardly to savor my company, they were to relish my wife's culinary skills, he would say. And I believe him now. On the day Bob passed, my wife, Yasmin, told me she awoke that night to see Bob standing at the foot of our bed. While I don't doubt her word, I take comfort in the fact that at least he dropped by to see what's cooking. I so wish I had awakened, that he had awakened me as well. I would have loved to have had one last parting glimpse of my dear friend, who I know came by to bid his last adieu. My friendship with Bob took on a subtle spiritual hue around 10 years ago, when I began to sense a certain deep, quiet inner unfolding of this wonderful man. This emergence from his impeccable professional shell was to me almost palpable and more than a little surprising, as many of you who know him would agree. You see, all I'd seen until then had been Bob, the man of science, the scholar, the researcher, the intellectual, the consummate professional. But gradually, I became aware of a deeply spiritual and compassionate human being. As the professional facade began to melt, it would allow a kind and sensitive core to shine through in wonderfully warming ways. Some years later, he posted a comment on my website in response to a modest little book I had written. I was deeply moved by his words. For the first time, I peeked through a little window into his soul and caught a glimpse of a delicate sensitivity that not many, I would imagine, had seen. So moved was I by Bob's sweet words, they're enshrined on my website and shall remain there. And I'll quote, this is an excerpt, and not a plug for my book by any means. The best thing I've read in years. It reminded me of Khalil Gibran's The Prophet, which I also enjoyed immensely. It speaks from the soul. Its message is the understanding of humanity and relationship to the universe. The message in this book allows us to view our society and the world in more constructive and healing light. Since reading this book, I have become more inclined to help the less fortunate and poor. It has made me painfully aware of my insensitivities toward other creatures who share this planet. End of quote. Those last two sentences, my friends, encapsulate the pith of the real Bob, the version I gained the honor of knowing over the last few years of his life. I would say the Bob Sbordone I knew was the quintessential humanitarian. We would meet for lunch every few weeks at this quaint little Italian restaurant in Laguna Niguel. Oddly, it's the only one who wished to frequent, with me at any rate. We used to go there so often we were referred to as the odd couple. I would imagine, given our contrast in complexion and stature. He would predictably order the same dish every single time, the sirloin salad. We had our own little favorite table out on the patio, where we'd get down to unraveling the planet's mysteries and, naturally, solving all the world's problems. It was during these latter years that Bob would express to me deep frustrations about not being able to openly express to friends and colleagues two subjects that were nearest to his heart. He was deeply troubled by the fact that he felt he needed to be careful about discussing them openly. He absolutely abhorred the term conspiracy theorist. He despised it with a passion. He felt it was the cavalier response of television watchers. When I quote Bob. He despised it with a passion and called them television watchers. He would describe those who brushed away alternative explanations of significant events, events that are backed by credible scientific evidence, as people too lazy to do their own research, especially into areas he believed to be crucially important, not just to him, but to the well-being of our planet. I recall Bob telling me he would enjoy nothing more than shout from the rooftops those things that were important to him so that the world would wake up. Who was to know that fate had other plans and would rob him of the opportunity to do so? I am honored beyond words, that Bob took me on as an ally on his mission of truth. I sensed that for whatever reason, Bob found in me a vehicle that could help spread his messages of truth. In fact, it was at Bob's constant urging that I eventually launched a radio program to discuss these and other similar subjects shunned by the mainstream media. In all such endeavors, Bob was my impetus, my motivation, my inspiration, my mentor, and my anchor. I recall Bob once telling me that truth, above all else, stood supreme, that it was the pinnacle of all godly virtues, and that a man who failed to muster the conviction of courage and courage to stand up and speak the truth would have lived his life in vain. At least as far as giving voice to his too passionate interests, I wish to ensure Bob Sbordone shall not have lived his life in vain. As to whether or not I should touch upon these subjects here today is a decision I had to really wrestle with. It hasn't been easy. I questioned the appropriateness of divulging things Bob and I discussed, even though I believed them to be admirable and vitally important aspects of the man, aspects that reflected his core passions. Even though Bob had freely discussed these subjects with great passion with many of his friends and colleagues, some of whom are present, I still felt torn. Finally, I decided to meditate on the matter. I asked Bob for his guidance as to whether I should proceed. I asked him for a signal, and I cannot consciously tell you whether I received one, but I am convinced beyond any doubt that it is Bob's wish that I do. I share this information with you with the heartfelt belief that it will help soothe the soul of my dear departed friend and will help to ease his stifled feelings. In fact, so strongly do I feel about this, I would deem it an injustice to my friend was I to not do so. Had our roles been reversed, I know this is what Bob would have done for me. Of the two subjects near to Bob's heart, one is relatively benign, the other quite controversial. One of the two subjects is the fascinating field of extraterrestrial intelligence. It was Bob's unwavering belief, indeed shared by thousands of scientists, astronauts, pilots, military personnel, and millions of others around the world, that our planet has been visited by extraterrestrial beings for millennia and continues to be visited to this very day. And that there is a process in place to conceal these truths from widespread knowledge. It was because of his interest in this field that Bob joined MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, a global research organization comprised of scientists, engineers, pilots, and other professionals and lay people actively engaged in the study of this fascinating phenomenon. It was there that I first met Bob some 17 years ago, when we both served on the board. That was the root of our friendship. It was Bob's fervent hope that one day academia would become more involved in this research. Should any of you, ladies and gentlemen, be interested in learning more about this subject, another one of Bob's dear friends is here today. Mr. Jan Harzan. Jan is the executive director of MUFON International. Please feel free to speak with Jan when you find a moment, if it were to interest you. It would please Bob greatly. Jan, would you please stand up for a moment? Ladies and gentlemen, Jan Harzan. Bob's other subject area of interest and scrutiny was far more controversial. That was the subject of the attacks of 9/11. Bob was the first to admit that the disturbing facts about this event are neither comfortable nor palatable to many Americans. Being of scientific mind, he questioned the official narrative. He challenged the data released to the public in the 9/11 Commission report, especially after he discovered that a third tower, a 47-story skyscraper that had not been struck by an aircraft, had suddenly collapsed in a 6-second freefall, like a pillar of sand, later that very same day. But what shocked Bob even more was that this unprecedented, catastrophic event failed to receive one single word of mention anywhere in the 680 pages of the 9/11 Commission report. He soon became convinced that the unspeakable crime of 9/11 begged a proper investigation. As Bob was fond of saying about the mystifying disintegration of the three towers, and I quote him, "Forget the storyline. Focus on the physics. God did not suspend the laws of physics on that one day." And Bob was hardly alone in this belief. Personally, I'm a retired pilot. I have a degree in aeronautical engineering, and my specialty was aerodynamics and structures. So you might consider me one who was in strong agreement with Bob. But literally thousands of architects, structural engineers, pilots, firefighters, demolitions experts, and other professionals around the world fully share his views. Only this fact is rarely reported and never really discussed in the mainstream media, which explains why it seems so odd to anyone unacquainted with the research to hear it said publicly. To those interested in learning more about this, other of Bob's two pet subjects, I would suggest you look into Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, one of Bob's favorite groups. or ae911.org. Or please feel free to speak with another of Bob's old friends who's also here with us today, Dr. Wood. Dr. Wood, a physicist who was deeply involved with the US Army's ballistic missile defense systems. Dr. Wood would be happy to share his opinions on this subject, which was crucially important and most troubling to Bob Sbordone. Dr. Wood, would you please stand up? Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Wood, forgive me. Finally, let me give you a short paragraph from one of Bob's favorite spiritual texts, The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. So inspired was Bob by this timeless classic that when he heard of my age-long interest in the book, he would urge me to narrate it on CD. It would please Bob to know this is something I'm in the process of doing. The entirety of the work shall be dedicated to the memory of Dr. Bob Sbordone. One day, towards the very end of his time with us, as I was seated at his bedside, Bob said to me in a feeble whisper, "Neela, read me The Prophet." I said I'd remember to bring the book with me the next day. Alas, when I saw him next, I would discover he had just minutes left to live. Although he was unconscious, I sat beside him and began to read, but found myself too distraught, emotionally incapable of getting past the first few lines. Soon, it was too late. That was the first time in our 17-year relationship that I felt I had let him down. Now, I would like to finish what he asked of me. Bob, I know you're listening. This is for you, my friend. It is short. It is accepted from the chapter on love, which is a rather long chapter. Love gives naught but itself, and takes naught but from itself. Love possesses not, nor would it be possessed, for love is sufficient unto love. When you love, you should not say, "God is in my heart," but rather, "I am in the heart of God." And think not you can direct the course of love, for love, if it finds you worthy, directs your course. Love has no other desire but to fulfill itself. But if you love and must needs have desires, let these be your desires, to melt and be like a running brook that sings its melody to the night, to know the pain of too much tenderness, to be wounded by your own understanding of love, and to bleed willingly and joyfully, to wake at dawn with a winged heart and give thanks for another day of loving, to rest at the noon hour and meditate love's ecstasy, to return home at eventide with gratitude, and then to sleep with a prayer for the beloved in your heart and a song of praise upon your lips. I hope you enjoyed that, Bob. Thank you.
Thank you, Neela. Is the mic on? Anyway, Bob was special to many of us, and I've asked a representative from UCLA and from USC Athletic Department and the Brain Injury Association to come and speak to you about what lasting influence Bob will have on their programs. So I would like Dr. Greg Miller from UCLA to come up and give us how Bob's influence will last through eternity. Dr. Miller?
Wonderful, wonderful thing we've just heard. It's just really touching. Thank you. My name is Greg Miller. I'm the chair of the psychology department at UCLA. Bob was a graduate student in our department, and he earned his PhD with us in clinical psychology, and he taught for us, and he went on to do so many things that make us proud. Very grateful for the opportunity to be part of this event, to share with you the impact that Bob's generosity will have on the field to which he devoted his life's work. His bequest has established the Robert Sbordone Psychology Graduate Student Support Fund in our department. With his gift, Bob has created a lasting legacy on our campus where he invested so much as a student, a clinician, a researcher, and a teacher. His gift will enable UCLA psychology to continue to attract the very best graduate students, such as Bob. These days, we've grown a lot. We have more than 3,200 undergraduate majors in our department, about 200 doctoral students, about 70 faculty. Our department spans areas of excellence in social, cognitive, clinical, health, quantitative, and developmental psychology, as well as neuroscience. By some measures, this department that he graduated from is the highest ranked department at UCLA and tied for the best full-range psychology department nationally. We continue to provide training in Bob's specialty, which is a unique interaction of clinical psychology, cognitive psychology, and human neuroscience. His generous contribution will make a tremendous ripple effect beyond our campus by helping our students. His gift could not have come at a better time for us when we're facing growing demands to help our students in our PhD program who struggle to meet the rising cost of living in LA. I'd like to offer all of you an opportunity to visit us in Westwood to meet with our talented students and take a tour of our facilities. You'd see the work we're doing is continuing to improve lives, which is the work that Bob has so strongly believed in. Thank you.
Our next representative is from USC, which is where I met Bob. As an 18-year-old, he was in a marketing class, and I was the only female in the class. And obviously, I came from a high school called Baldwin Park, and we didn't have big men like that at Baldwin Park High School. So, you know, I was kind of like this, and I don't think I ever spoke with him, but I met him a couple years later when I was dating Dallas, and they were on the track team together. But Bob told me, I said, do you remember that marketing class? He says, oh yeah. And he said, he says, I remember you. Well, I guess I stood out. Anyway, I would like to introduce Scott, and I don't remember your last name. Anyway, Scott is a representative from the USC Athletic Department, which was also a recipient of a generous gift. So he can tell you about that. And you can see the various pictures we have of Bob and his teammates up here. So I hope you'll have a chance to take a look before you leave. Anyway, Scott.
Hi, everyone. My name is Scott Wanzlak. We're not being very easy on you today, Barbara, with our last name, so I apologize. First off, thank you for putting this on for Bob and for all you guys, everybody that was involved with this. I know that a lot of work goes into this and a lot of planning goes into this. I will be the first to admit that I did not have the opportunity to meet Bob. But over the last month and a half to 2 months or so, just through reading about him, talking to people, corresponding with Barbara, it became very obvious and very evident that, like a lot of people from USC and UCLA, Bob was an overachiever in all facets of his life. And the most interesting thing that stands out to me is if you look at 3 core aspects of his life, if you take those individually, he would be a phenomenal person just for those. And the first is, his service with the Air Force. Just seeing the flag ceremony outside, it, reminisced with me, just with my grandfather, my father, and everybody that served, and I'm sure it brought some emotions to you guys as well. Second thing, in his professional career with UCLA and in the medical industry, and being on the forefront of a lot of different things going on there. And the third thing, athletically. Which brings me to USC. And even though he worked for UCLA, I would like to think that his heart was always a Trojan. One of the things that happens, when we get a gift at such as Bob's magnitude, is oftentimes people are looking for something, whether it's a name on a building, whether it's just to be coddled and handheld, and different things throughout the process. And one of the things that has fallen in line with a lot of things people have been saying about Bob is it could not have been farther from the truth. We actually, I believe the only correspondence that I had with Bob throughout his tenure, or throughout his life, was I have a list of all of our former athletes, and he had confirmed his address at one point or another with me. But one day, my boss came into my office and he said, "Hey, we had a former track athlete, and he gave a substantial gift to athletics." And we started doing research on him, and nobody had ever heard anything, about him until we started reading about him. Just the athletic prowess that he had, as a javelin thrower, and everything that he did throughout his life. It is really touching to read about, and made us really, really proud that he would consider us, and it meant that much to him. The gift that he made to us, it was more of an unrestricted gift. And I think he looked at the athletic department and kind of wanted to more be about the entire athletic department. Whatever we needed to use the money for, we could use the money for. So we did get a portion of that gift, which will go to the unrestricted fund. But serendipitously, as this was, is over the last 4 months or so, before we knew about Bob's gift, was we are doing a renovation to our tennis stadium. Well, part of our tennis stadium has an area called the Dungeon, which is essentially the weightlifting facility specifically for our throwers. Now we had to raise X amount of money for this specific facility, and we had raised about half of that. And the second part of Bob's gift is actually right about just the amount that we were trying to raise for the rest of it. And so we'll be able to honor him in some way or another in that. So with all that being said, I think that the one thing that I'm going to get out of today, just with the stories and the things that I've been reading, is that not only can USC use a lot more people like Bob, but I think the world could use a lot more people like Bob as well. So thank you all.
Why don't you go around and find a seat. Thank you. So Scott, did I understand you that some of the money he gave is going for the renovation of the weight room?
Yeah, specifically for track athletes and specifically for the throwers.
Okay, for the throwers. Well, that's wonderful. And we have a few throwers in here today. Okay, the next person I would like to introduce is Carrie Mosier. She's from the Brain Injury Association of America. And Bob gave them a generous gift also. And she'll explain a little bit about that organization.
Can you hear me okay? 35 years ago, a small group of family members, doctors, and researchers gathered together in Framingham, Massachusetts to discuss how they could help individuals who had sustained life-altering traumatic brain injuries, otherwise known as TBI. And back in 1980, most people were completely unaware of the prevalence of TBI. And today, most people are still unaware that there are 2.5 million people in America who will sustain a traumatic brain injury in a year. And there are an additional 5.3 million individuals who live with a disability due to a traumatic brain injury. Any brain injury, whether mild, moderate, or severe, can have devastating consequences. It can change the way you think, act, feel, move. So imagine waking up one day and you don't know the difference between your toothbrush and your hairbrush. Or imagine waking up one day and you don't know whether you're supposed to put your shoes on first or your socks on first. All too often, people who sustain traumatic brain injuries are denied the proper rehabilitation and psychological counseling that they need. And for some, the long-term consequences can be joblessness, homelessness, incarceration, and even suicide. The Brain Injury Association of America was established to help these individuals and their families. We are the oldest and largest brain injury advocacy organization in the nation, and our mission is to advance awareness, education, research, and treatment, and to improve the quality of life for all people who have sustained a traumatic brain injury. Together with our network of 28 state affiliates, we respond to 30,000 requests for information, education, and support each year. We welcome 1.5 million visitors to our website annually, and we educate millions of survivors, families, caregivers, researchers, and clinicians. I did not know Dr. Sbordone personally, but I do know of his research and of his extensive writings, and he included a chapter for a book published by us, which was titled Analysis, Understanding and Presentation of Patients Involving Traumatic Brain Injury. Upon learning of his death, several members of our board of directors remarked that he had made a very positive impact on their careers. Dr. Sbordone also led the charge on issues relating to mild brain injury. Mild brain injury is even more misdiagnosed and underfunded and misunderstood than moderate or severe injuries. And he spent a great deal of time educating attorneys about mild TBI and letting them know that this type of injury is still as devastating to a person and comes with its own set of highly negative medical consequences. I became involved with the Brain Injury Association of America because my brother suffered a traumatic brain injury 20 years ago, and Dr. Sbordone was an advocate for people like my brother and for all people who have sustained a traumatic brain injury. Later this month, our board will be meeting to discuss how we're going to invest his very generous gift, but we do know that we're going to use it in a way that allows us to expand our services and to honor his legacy for years to come. In the meantime, we have established a tribute to him on our website, which is biausa.org, where people can remember him. And thank you so much for including me, Barbara, in this celebration of his life.
Thank you. I think we'll have one more tribute, and then everybody, they've got lunch about ready, and so you can go get some lunch and come back in. And then I would like to pass the microphone around because I know some of you have some interesting stories. I know Dallas has one I think he'd like to tell about Coney Island. So anyway, I put him on the spot. Anyway, Jan, would you like to say something?
Well, I was trying to think about the first time I ever met Bob, and it was actually at a MUFON meeting in Orange County here in about 1999 or so. And I was introducing our guest speaker for the evening, and all of a sudden this gentleman in the back of the room came through the doorway. Now, he didn't just come through the doorway, he filled the entire doorway. That was my first glimpse of Bob. And then, most interestingly, as I was continuing to speak, I noticed that he methodically made his way down the center aisle. Now, most people, when they come in late to a meeting, they'll sit in the back of the room because they don't want to be disturbing people. But Bob had actually made his way methodically down the aisle, and then in the second row, he stepped in 2 seats and sat down. And I noticed that for the next several months that he always did that. He would always sit in the second row in the second seat. That was his place to sit. Sometimes I also noticed that he would doze off. But I think that was because he spent long hours, many long hours, at his work, which I learned later. It wasn't too much longer that I had an opportunity to talk to him on one of the breaks and just find out a little bit about him. And I was very impressed to find out that he was a neuropsychologist. So my first inkling was, he's probably here trying to figure out what's wrong with all these people who are studying UFOs. But he wasn't. Actually, he had had some experiences in his work and line of work dealing with some of our intelligence community and some projects he'd been on. And actually, he was told behind the scenes that there was actually something to this, and he wanted to come out and find out for himself. And that's kind of who Bob was. He really wanted to dive in, peel back, study the subject, and really understand it for himself. So if I could kind of think of a couple words that would describe Bob in my mind, obviously big is one, kind, gentle, I think Neela touched on those, and a deep thinker. He was always thinking about things. He wanted to know how it worked. He wanted to know what was behind it. He wanted to know the data. He was a very serious gentleman. I always found him to be very serious, but he was always kind and gentle. And so we invited him at a later date to come on and be on our board, and he did. He joined us in about 2002, I believe, and was on the board, served with Neela and with Bob Wood over here till about 2006, when I think for professional reasons he decided he probably should step off the board, which is unfortunate. One of the things we're trying to do is make this subject more palatable so people will talk about it, because 10% of the folks in the world have actually had an actual sighting close enough that they could identify something as an unidentified flying object. And we're trying to make it safe for not only the people in academia, but in industry and the media to talk about this without all the laugh factor. And Bob was very serious about it. And so I'm very honored to have known Bob. He's a great man, and I'm looking forward to seeing him again soon. Thank you.
Okay. I know some people might have to leave, so you may want to hear a couple of these stories about life with Bob in his early years. And I'm going to ask Dallas to give a story about Bob and him on a visit to Coney Island.
Thank you. As you may know, Bob was an aficionado of roller coasters, but this story is a little bit different. I was on the 1960 Olympic team, and we were quartered in New York City. What? Okay. In the 1960 Olympic Games, I was on the Olympic team, and we were in New York City for 2 weeks before we went to Europe. And Bob came down from Boston and took me to Coney Island. So we went to Coney Island and some of the rides, but the one that was memorable was the parachute jump. I don't think they have this anymore because it was nuts. Anyway, so we went. There was a little carny running the ride, and so we went up to this guy and said, we're pretty big guys. Will this work? And our combined weight probably was 550 pounds. I said, oh yeah, we have a lot of big guys on this. Won't be a problem. So we get on. I don't know if you've seen this. It's like a Ferris wheel bench with a little rod in front of you to keep you from falling out. And then the bench is tethered with 2 bungee cords. And they take you up almost 100 yards. It's 70, I think it was 76 meters, the height. And I can't believe they still have this ride because the liability would be huge. Anyway, so we get on the ride, and the little carny, he's smoking a cigar, says, oh, we've had plenty of big guys on this ride. You get on. So we got on. It takes us up to the top, and then it wouldn't release us. We hung around at the top of this thing, and it wouldn't. I'm sure we must have overridden some kind of a safety device. So it let us down very slowly. We come down to actually I was relieved, Bob was disappointed. He let us go down really slowly to the bottom, and then the carny goes into this little mechanical shack and does something, up we go again. And this time we got unbelievable. So, you know, the ride, you free fall for 50 feet, and then you come, and then the parachute opens. And we came down like bat out of hell. We passed up everybody. So anyway, so we get to the bottom of the ride, and we actually bottomed out. The bench went all the way to the macadam, bouncing back, and fortunately we didn't have any feet underneath it. So that was the Coney Island ride. Fortunately, we didn't have our feet under the bench, or we'd have been crushed. But you know, Bob liked roller coasters, and we went on the Pike. Do they still have the Pike in Santa Monica?
Long Beach, no.
No, it was in Santa Monica, I think. Anyway, we went on the ride there, and then in Magic Mountain roller coaster. So you know, he was.
His car is his need for speed.
Yeah, but the old Pike was really scary because it was a wooden roller coaster, and you go up to the top, and the first drop was like, you know, you're swallowing your heart, and then it would shake the whole time you're going around. You know, but anyway, that's my Coney Island story with Bob. We survived the parachute jump.
Thank you. I'm going to tell one quick story because before Dallas and I were married, Bob and Dallas were roommates, and they lived in a place called the Jungle. Those of you that were, I don't think the Jungle's still there. It was like a jungle in all these little apartments. And anyway, they lived in this jungle, which was totally disgusting. I mean, I went in there and they hadn't cleaned the grill on the stove, and it was pretty awful. But anyway, they were on athletic scholarship. They were paid $100 a month to lean on a rake. They were on operations and maintenance, I guess, and they were supposed to be raking leaves. And every time I saw them, they were leaning on a rake down in the main street there. Anyway, so they were big guys. They could eat at the university table, but I don't think it was available on weekends, was it, Dallas? You had to provide your own food. So they decided that they wanted to go to the store. Well, I had a car. I had a little 61 Falcon two-door. And so I was the designated driver, and I had to take them to a health food store called Organicville, which I have no idea where it was. But anyway, so Bob would cram himself into the back seat, and Dallas would be in the front seat, and the car kind of went, you know, kind of listed. And then we would go to Organicville. Well, we get to Organicville, and they would extricate themselves from the car, and they would get their little shopping basket and go around, and here are all these little old ladies and these two great big guys buying their groceries in Organicville. And I think throughout Bob's life, he probably went to a lot of health food stores. Anyway, it was always funny because then we'd load up the trunk with their food, and you know, it was expensive, but $100 a month didn't go very far in those days. But that's what the athletes were paid, and then that leads into the Clifton's cafeteria. Does anybody want to talk about? Jim, Wade, where are you? Do you know the Clifton's cafeteria story?
You know, I forget the name, but I know we ate a lot there, and they tried to close the doors before we got there. But you know, it's,
This is Jim Wade.
I was a roommate of Bob's, a fall track mate of Bob's. He was actually my tutor at times for some of my classes. Some of the stuff I couldn't figure out, I'd give over to Bob, and well, let me at that. So he'd work there an hour and like that, and write it all down, not recopy it. So I was able to get through the class on behalf of Bob, you know what I mean, at that time. But, you know, looking back through the past, SC had no weight room at the time while we were at the university. So if you don't lift weights, either it was in the room where you were, I was in the dorm at that time, or you would go down to YMCA downtown, and then Dallas, I think you worked out at the athletic club at times, you know. But Bob, Dallas, and I would go down to YMCA to work out with the weights. And a lot of times it was on a weekend, so after we left there, we would go down to this all-you-can-eat place. And I don't remember where we took the bus or what we did at that time. But anyway, we would clean up a whole dish full of stuff. And they'd look at us, and they're about ready to close, and we told them, want some more. But, you know, looking back, back through the years when we used to go down there and work out there, one day I went down there with Bob at the YMCA working out with the weights. And Dallas, you weren't there on that particular trip. But we got out of the thing, you're all jacked up, you know what I mean, feeling this like that. And we're walking down the street, and there was a Volkswagen there, and this is towards the evening time. And I said, Bob, let's go over and listen this damn thing up, you know what I mean? This is in the rowdy days, okay? So we get behind this Volkswagen, you got one side, and we lift the crazy thing up there and just let it drop. And what we found out, there was a couple in the back seat making time. Yeah. And so Bob says, I was wondering why that was so damn heavy. So it was kind of a little embarrassing for us at the time. So Bob said, well, we apologize for that. Good luck. You know what I mean? So, but, so we strolled down and, you know, did our thing. So we had a lot of fun memories and stuff like that. So those back when the days where you raise a little hell at times, maybe we still do, I'm not sure, you know. But the only thing I can tell you about Bob, he was, you know, we all come from different economic backgrounds growing up. And Bob was he wasn't born with a golden spoon up his tail, let's put it that way. And he worked for everything he did. Athletics is competition. And along with competition, you strive to do your best. And that's reflected in his lifestyle and where he's at throughout history. He was also very appreciative of Dallas and your family. You know, through the years, he always talked to me about that, you know. So it was a lot of fun to reconnect with everybody. I talked with Chris quite a bit on the phone, you know, and Barbara, but I appreciate all the work you guys have done as far as putting this on, and I know Bob would. So that's some of my wild stories.
Anyway, Dallas said that he and Bob used to go to Clifton's cafeteria after they went, I don't know, was that to the YMCA or anyway, and what, you bought a ticket and then you went back through the line or something?
You get a stamp on your hand, a fluorescent stamp. So one of us would get the fluorescent stamp and have pay the $1.50, and both of us would eat.
Anyway, it's not like the athletes today, right, Scott? Anyway, they had to scramble. Okay, Dennis?
My name is Denny Schmidt. I was on the football team at SC, but I also participated in track in the spring. And I was telling Dallas and reminding him that one evening there was Bob and Dallas and I. We were out wandering around somewhere right off campus out there. And at that time it was better, but it still wasn't real good as far as the neighborhood. But I felt pretty good being with Bob and Dallas out there, you know. and we brought along some cans of beer, and then we realized we didn't have an opener. They didn't have tabs that opened them or anything like that. And so I'm figuring, how in the world are we going to do this? Well, I can't remember which one started it, but before I realized it, here's Bob and Dallas. They're biting holes in the top of these beer cans. and I'm thinking, I thought the football players were wild. But it was, and I go back to Dallas too in high school, and when I came out of Bakersfield, and he was coming from the Phoenix area, and we were competing in some common track meets, and all I remember is that I was above average shot putter, but and I was just straining my whole body off, doing whatever I did. It was probably around 56 feet or something at that time, early in the season. And then Dallas comes up there, and he's not even warming up yet. He's just standing there, and he chucks this thing like 63 feet, and you think about that as a competitor, you're kind of demoralizing. but anyway, we go way back to then, and the football players and the track guys, we all associated one another and appreciated each other because everybody's working, it's hard, and so it's good to, I'm glad I had the opportunity to spend time with Bob and Dallas and some of these guys, and I truly appreciate it.
Anybody else? Gary, do you want to say something? Gary was a discus thrower.
Bob was a few years older than me. I really didn't have the close personal relationships like you've been hearing about. But when I did start to get to know him, because I think the deal is he was coming around and to train, during the time that when I started SC, it was like 63, 64. And so he and guys like Rink Babka, who no one's really talked about Rink today, and I'm sure Rink would have liked to have been here, but he's laid up after having a hip replacement. And then while he lives up in the Sacramento area and Stockton, whatever. And he just gone in to have his hip replaced a few weeks ago. He happens to be a patient right now of mine as well when he comes down this way. But so while he's in recovering from his hip procedure, he falls and he fractures the hip that he just got. So he had to have it redone. So now he's in like a recovery facility. So he couldn't get down here. I would have probably said something to him about coming to this event. But so Sbordone would come around, of course, like everybody knows, he's a huge guy. I mostly, because I didn't know him that well, that closely, he was just always really a friendly person and easy to talk to. But the rumor I heard about him was, what he did for some extra income, I heard he was a bouncer at the Palomino Club in Hollywood. Is that true, Dallas? Because, I can't even imagine how imposing he was, an imposing figure he was, and no one's going to give him any trouble, So he probably did quite well for himself in that role. And as the years have gone by, of course, getting together different track events at USC, it was always wonderful to be able to hang around Bob, and because he always had good stories, and it was fun with Jim Wade and Dallas and whoever happened to be there at the time. And Bob was also a patient of mine too. I'm an oral surgeon in Huntington Beach, but and after I treated him, I said, don't worry about any compensation, and I just took care of some extraction or something like that, wisdom tooth, whatever. So he comes by another time. He says, well, I have something for you. And he gave me a copy of a book that he wrote. That thing was like massive, it's like, in his field. So I still have it around my house someplace. I have to get it out, and I think I started to read it one time and just put me to sleep. Yeah, he was way out there. I didn't realize as much as I realize today after reading everything about him and seeing all these wonderful photographs. Thanks for doing such a great job. He was a great guy.
Okay. Dean was also on the track team at that time.
I wasn't a shot putter, and I wasn't a javelin thrower, but see these guys over here in this picture, and then with Mortensen, and then you add in there the McKeever twins, and I'm sure you remember them. And you know what? All those guys, when we went out on the town, I went with them. Had no problems. The other thing I want to say about Bob, He was a character. He was fun. He was a gentle giant. But I taught at Monroe, which is in the San Fernando Valley. I taught there 41 years, and about, I guess, maybe the early 90s, early 80s, or late 80s, we have a shot put ring, and you can see it from the street, but you got to go over several fences if you want to get to it. So a kid comes in at lunchtime and says, "Coach, there's somebody on our shot put ring." Well, we don't allow that. So I said, "Well, tell him to get off." He says, "No way, this guy's a monster." So I said, "Okay, I'll go out." And lo and behold, it was Bob. He had just came from the VA hospital, which is not very far from Monroe High School. He stopped, went over the fence, took off his coat, took off his dress shirt, and had his slacks on, nice shoes on. He's out in the ring putting it. So I'm walking out there, and I said, "This guy, we could use him." And, well, it was Bob. So I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm practicing. I've been coming by here for a couple days," and he says, "I get the itch." So he gets the ball and comes over the fence, and he gets a workout in, puts his dress shirt back on and his tie. I said, hey, next time you want to come, call me and I'll open the gates for you. Sure.
Yeah, you don't know me very well, but I wish I knew you better. Bob asked me, I was honored by him asking me to proofread the book that he wrote, Client from the Future. And I did that, and he accepted a couple of my suggestions, but as I was reading this, I got so excited about this story because it's basically time travel. And it's written in such a way that is technically consistent, logical. And the thing that's exciting about it is two things, actually. Number one, in my judgment, the hero of the book is Bob. So you ought to read this book. And the second thing is it is a good read. I kept thinking about this story after I put the book down. So read that book.
Hi, I'm Ted Smith. I was co-captain of the SC team in 1960, and I was the runner component. Charlie Dumas was the field component. He used to divide it up like that. And unfortunately, Charlie passed away a few years ago. First person to jump 7 feet. Never got recognition for it until he was later in life. But I was going to say something, but I think that it's the wrong thing to say here. But on the not so nice side, some things that happened. But the point I wanted to make about Bob is that he was the ultimate student athlete. And think about what we read today happening in colleges and the way kids are acting. To me, Bob is somebody that we should write a book about, and his story should be told. I think SC should do something to highlight the careers of people like Dallas and Bob, and let the kids out there know that there's something beyond athletics. But Bob, he had an opportunity to go to Harvard. He turned it down to go to SC to be a javelin thrower. He had confidence in his body, as we can see, and he made the most of it, and then he moved on. And he was somebody that benefited society, and we just need to get out there and to do something to see that other people learn about him and some of the young people that have gone through as student athletes and made the most of it. I appreciate very much the opportunity to come and be here. Thank you.
Anybody else want to say something? Kristen, what did you tell me now about the valet parking? If you need to.
The valet gentleman came in and said they are closing at 2. So he's going to come in here. If you get your valet tickets out, he will stamp them for you. And you guys need to retrieve your keys if you're going out on the boat, because when we get back, you're going to have to walk to your car and start your own car. So he said he'd come in about a half an hour before, like about 1:30. So I just want everybody to know that.
Let's see. Anybody else? Because my children and grandchildren always called Bob Uncle Bob, and many of his friends had children who also called him Uncle Bob. So he had a large family of nieces and nephews, and we all loved him. But let's see. Kristen, do you want to tell your story about? She has one, just a minute.
Plenty. Well, I can say that I am Bob Sbordone's first test subject. When he was working on his master's at UCLA, he used to come to my dad and Dallas and Barbara's house, and I remember vaguely little puzzle pieces and color blocks, and he confirmed that I was his first experiment. So I lay claim to that. For a child psychology class, I guess. I think a lot of people don't realize that, and I've learned this through like some of his friends, Herb Weiner, that could not be here, but Bob was bullied growing up. Believe it or not, Mr. South Boston was bullied in junior high and high school. Obviously not when he got to USC and stuff. But he used to call himself the world's biggest dwarf. And the man, you all know he was quite impressive. Roller coasters, he wanted a cat before he died, and it's funny, I was talking to somebody when he was married, he didn't like cats, so he obviously changed his ways. And I don't know if any of you guys were recipients of Bob's Christmas gifts, but he loved Best Buy, he loved Costco, and if there was a sale, and after he passed, I'm like, who needs 18 emergency kits in their garage? But it's like when bread makers were in, and I was living at Arizona at the time, and I don't know how many people got bread makers, but I'm sure there was plenty of them. DVRs, DVDs, I think he got a thrill doing that. So those are my memories. I mean, he's my 3 children's godfather, and he was very proud to be their godfather. I think things will come to mind later, but I think everybody's represented him really well. Harrison? So are we going to do karaoke now?
Well, one summer, Bob invited Harrison to spend a few days at his house. So Kristen is kind of an overprotective mother, but Bob would say, "Oh, Harrison, just get on the trolley and go down to the beach." Well, she about freaked out when she heard.
Hi, my name is Hal Petrie, and I'm from a different, smaller section of Bob's life. I came back from the Army in 1966 and was a student at Caltech on the track team. Bob was living in Pasadena at the time, and he had permission to train on the Caltech campus. And I was a javelin thrower on the Caltech team, and so he took me under his wing, and he was teaching me things. And one of his techniques was to have a small shot, like an 8-pound shot, and we'd go over to the baseball diamond where they had big chain link backstops, and he'd throw this thing, he wouldn't put it, he would throw it like he would throw the javelin. And he would encourage me to do this. And for several weeks we did that, and as time passed, the chain link backstop became more of a spinnaker. It just bowed out. like a belly on a huge monster. And one day we were doing it, and the track coach and the athletic director came out. His name was Bert Labroucherie, who I think had some contacts with UCLA over the years too. But he caught us doing this, and he was about 5'5" tall, and he shamed both of us over a couple of guys towering a foot over him, and we just stood there and took it, and he denied us permission to ever throw that shot against the backstop again. And the other little vignette I wanted to talk about was the fact that the reason he was training, this is in the late 60s, was, I believe, for the 68 Olympics, and hoped to make the team. He'd been an alternate on a previous team. And he went up to Northern California for some sort of a qualifying meet, and I got a phone call saying that he had blown out his knee and didn't make the team. He was coming back on an airplane and he needed a ride. And when I picked him up, he had his leg in a cast and it was sticking out straight. And the car I picked him up in was an 850 Fiat, a little tiny two-door sport coupe. So on the spot with the toolkit in the trunk, I took out the passenger seat and stowed it in the trunk, and he got in the back seat with his legs sticking all the way to the front fender well. And I took him back to Pasadena that way. He was an important friend to me for decades. I regret that I lost touch with him in recent years, but I certainly will always remember him very fondly.
Anybody else? Harrison, you don't want to talk about your time with Bob? Bob loved showing off his swords to Miles. And Harrison, I don't know if Max was there also, but he loved the swords and he loved the pictures of the airplanes that were in his house.
I'm Harrison, his youngest godson, youngest son of Kristen. Whenever we went over there to visit, he was so excited to show Miles and I, and even Caitlin, everything that he had, especially the swords. Was like I remember specifically the helmet from the Gladiator film that he would tell. He went to the auction, he got the sword that was in the scene where he swung it into the tree and all that, and just how vividly he talked about it really made me excited about it. And not to mention, whenever Miles and I would go over there alone, the biggest thing is his surround sound system. That was his pride and joy. And so even when I stayed there a couple years ago, it was 2 years ago, he took out like a laptop and like he started talking to me about UFOs and 9/11 and all this, and it was a different side of him that I've never seen, and it was definitely really cool because not really getting to be around him that much, but him being so involved with our lives from a distance that it's cool that he was putting in the effort, not really effort, but wanting to finally getting the chance. I was old enough to be someone that he can talk to as an adult, not just, hey, swords and surround sound systems, but he's like, oh, this is, yeah, like, and I remember when you dropped me off at his office that night, he got in his car, his Mercedes AMG E63, this just beautiful car. He got in it, and right off the highway, we pulled out of his office, and he just floored it about 90 miles an hour and took a right turn, and just this thing stuck to the ground like, yeah, and I was just sitting there wide-eyed about to poop my pants, and he's like, you like it? It's fun, right? And he was always like that. He always enjoyed everything and always enjoyed the smile on other people's face, that knowing that he was the one to cause it. And that's a very, very good quality that not many people nowadays have. It's a shame to see him not be here right now, but yeah, like he did not. We were actually planning to go down there to Palm Springs so he could show it to me and everything, but it was too hot that weekend, and he just didn't think it would have been worth it.
His garage was air conditioned, that's why his bill was $900 a month.
Yeah, I do remember when I stayed there, I was sitting in the basement watching TV, and he's like, why don't you go out and do something? I was like, what is there to do? I don't know what there is to do. He's like, he gave me $40 and he told me to go down to the beach and not come home until like 5 p.m. Like, he told me to leave the house and not come back until that time. And it's like, I was always kind of been on a leash, like I've never been allowed to do that, but so he kind of pushed me out of my proverbial shell in that sense of doing things on my own, and so he was a great guy and I miss him.
Okay. Any other?
Okay. All right, I have so many memories of Bob. Where do I begin? I mean, he was always very generous. I mean, from childhood, like being a little kid, I remember Bob. One thing I thought about, one time, after I graduated from USC, I had a job and I had quit, and Bob gave me a job. So I actually worked for Bob for like 3 months, and it's the most boring job I ever had in my life. And I kept telling him, Bob, there's nothing to do here. I just sit here and greet like 3 people, patients. I got to see his work, and I got to see some of the patients that he had to evaluate, and it really was kind of eye-opening to see the devastation some people experience with brain injuries and how he dealt with them. But I remember that I was just so bored out of my mind, and there was just nothing to do except sit there and read, and he insisted on paying me. I'm like, you can't pay me. I just sit here and read books all day and say hello once in a while and tell you someone's here. And, like, he totally helped me out, though. Finally, I ended up going to him saying, you got to get someone else. I got to get a real job. But he was very patient. He helped me and got me a job while I needed one. And, I think every Christmas I got some electronic thing from Costco or Sharper Image, or I didn't get the bread maker, but I got the juicer. And I got the coolest one was the temperature, like the thermometer, where it would tell you the outside temperature, and like he did give really cool Christmas gifts. Anyway, so that's, I could go on and on. I have so many stories of Bob. But I remember like him being a very observant man and very intelligent. And Bob saw things that most people didn't see. And he was very calming presence, like when I would be like, all of us would be like excited about stuff, he's very calm. Like he had this way of making you calm. And I don't know, I could go on forever, but that's my stories.
Okay, anybody else? Anyway, yes.
Since this it's nowhere near as serious when we started, I recall one incident where Bob shared my passion for flying, and we used to go to all these air shows and look at all these fighter aircraft and so on and so forth. And he always wanted to fly in an ultralight. And I used to go fly ultralights out in Paris, California. So I said, Bob, let's go. We went there, and he was too heavy, and we couldn't fly. So I think he was quite disappointed about the fact that he couldn't. I thought that was quite funny. Nowhere near as good as the parachute story, but this is a good one. And incidentally, I think I was remiss in being too brief in the introductions I made to the 2 gentlemen I had stand up. I should have mentioned that Jan Harzan is a graduate of UCLA, degree in nuclear engineering, and he's the former head of IBM for Orange County. And Bob Wood, also an old friend and colleague of Bob's, of our Bob, is a 43-year career physicist who worked for McDonnell Douglas. And what's unique about Bob is the fact that Mr. McDonnell Sr. himself at his behest, ordered Bob to research UFOs. And that's an interesting tidbit. Thank you.
Well, I just kind of want to explain how we offer our service. We'd like to start off if anybody wanted to share a last memory or thought, they're more than welcome to do so. Here I'm going to read a brief little passage. I'll bring the basket around if everybody would like to take a rose. I believe there's maybe somebody that's going to help scatter the ashes, and then we can all throw more roses into a circle of tribute. So with that said, did anybody have anything they'd like to share or say?
You asked me to, but I don't know if you still want to. There might be others who'd love to say something. Okay. All I was going to read was something from the prophet that Bob liked, just the last chapter called The Farewell. And thank you again for asking me to do this. This is from The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, and it's excerpted from the chapter, Farewell. Fare you well, my friends. The day has ended. I am ready. The stream has reached the sea, and once more the great mother holds her son against her breast. It is closing upon us, even as the water lily upon its own tomorrow. farewell to you and the youth I have spent with you. It was but yesterday we met in a dream. You have sung to me in my aloneness, and I, of your longings, have built a tower in the sky. But now our sleep has fled, and our dream is over, and it is no longer dawn. The noontide is upon us, and our half-awaking has turned to fuller day, and we must part. If in the twilight of memory we should meet once more, we shall speak again together, and you shall sing to me a deeper song. And if our hands should meet in another dream, we shall build another tower in the sky. Forget not that I shall come back to you. A little while, and my longing shall gather dust and foam for another body. A little while, a moment of rest upon the wind, and another woman shall bear me. That's for you, Bob.
I'm empty, but here's
We can always get another ball from you. So.
Yeah, I want.
The first one was on Gary, the next one's on me.
Start off bravely with a smile, and for my sake and in my name, live on and do all the things the same. Feed not your loneliness on empty days, but fill each waking hour in useful ways. Reach out your hand in comfort and in cheer, and I in turn will comfort and hold you near.
Rest in peace. Do we throw the roses in now? Look at him.
That was my bad. Trying to check out. Don't let Ian fall. We'll take half of this out.
You see it? Oh, yes.